Hi everyone, welcome back. We've got a brand new story to share with you. So let's begin. My name is Richard. I am 34 years old. And until last year, I thought I could trust the woman I married. Vera and I had 4 years of marriage behind us when everything fell apart. I've been working at a manufacturing company for 6 years now. It's steady work that brings in a considerable amount of money a year. It was enough to cover the basics. Vera and I met through friends back when we were both getting close to 30, dated for a couple of years, then got married with plans to build the usual suburban family. The fertility problems weren't something we'd expected. When you're young and planning your future together, you think kids will just happen naturally when you're ready. We started trying seriously about 18 months into our marriage, and when nothing happened after a year, we began what would become a long and expensive trip through the medical system. We tried everything. A doctor at the regional fertility clinic ran every test you could think of on both of us. Blood work, hormone levels, sperm counts, ultrasounds, procedures with names I couldn't say. The tests showed that everything looked normal for both of us, which was somehow more frustrating than if there had been a clear problem to fix. At least then we'd know what we were dealing with. The fertility treatments were hard on us, both emotionally and financially. Insurance covered some of it, but not the expensive stuff. We spent thousands of dollars we didn't really have on procedures that worked maybe 30% of the time. Vera would get her hopes up every month, take the pregnancy test, and we'd both act like it didn't crush us when it came back negative. One time that she actually got pregnant, we were full of joy, but she ended up miscarrying by the 4th month. This happened again, and even up till now, I lack words to describe the pain we felt. After 3 years of this, we were both worn out. The constant cycle of hope and disappointment was wearing us down, and the financial stress was putting a strain on our marriage that we didn't discuss directly, but both of us felt all the time. We'd fight about whether to try one more round of treatments or take a break. We'd fight about whose fault it might be, even though the doctors said it wasn't anyone's fault. We'd fight about whether we should look into adoption or just accept that we might not have kids. Every talk about our future felt loaded with disappointment and blame nobody wanted to say out loud. That's when, some months after our 3rd anniversary, my wife, Vera, talked to me about a wellness retreat. Her best friend Rachel had been talking about it for weeks. Rachel and her husband David had found this place in Colorado that did holistic fertility treatments, alternative medicine, meditation, diet changes, stress reduction techniques. All the stuff that regular doctors dismiss, but desperate couples are willing to try when nothing else has worked. Rachel was convinced this retreat was going to be the answer to her own fertility problems. She and David had been trying to have kids for almost as long as Vera and I had, and they were just as frustrated with the regular medical approach. The retreat was supposed to last 2 weeks, with couples taking part in various workshops, treatments, and lifestyle changes designed to help natural fertility. Vera was excited about the idea in a way I hadn't seen from her in months. She'd been so disturbed by our recent failed attempts that she'd started talking about giving up entirely. The retreat meant hope again, a different approach that might work where everything else had failed. Rachel had presented it as something they could do together, 2 best friends supporting each other through this difficult process. But the timing was bad for me. We were in the middle of a major equipment overhaul at the plant, and I was working 6-day work weeks, trying to keep everything running, while new machinery was being put in and set up. Taking 2 weeks off during this time would have meant leaving my team shorthanded during the most important part of the project. My supervisor had already made it clear that they needed all hands for the overhaul. I felt guilty about not being able to go, but Vera understood the situation. She knew how important the extra overtime pay would be for us, especially after the money we'd already spent on fertility treatments. She also pointed out that the retreat was designed for couples, but they did accept individuals in certain situations. If nothing else, she could learn techniques and approaches that we could use together when she got back. So I told her to go. Rachel and David were good people, friends we'd known for years, and I trusted them to look out for Vera while she was there. The retreat cost $1,500, which was money we didn't really have to spare, but it was less than another round of IVF and might actually help where the medical treatments hadn't. Vera deserved the chance to try something different, especially if it might give us both a break from the constant stress and disappointment of the past few years. She left on a Thursday morning. I drove her to the airport to meet up with her friend and her husband. She had a new journal to track her experiences, a suitcase full of comfortable clothes for yoga and meditation sessions, and an optimism that reminded me of why I'd fallen in love with her in the first place. I kissed her goodbye and told her to focus on herself, not to worry about me or work or anything else back home. The first week she was gone, I threw myself into work. The equipment installation was going smoothly, and working long hours helped keep me from missing her too much. She called every day to check in, and she sounded good, relaxed. The retreat was in a beautiful location, with good instructors and other couples going through similar problems. My wife was learning about nutrition and stress management, taking part in group discussions about fertility and relationships, getting individual coaching on techniques we could use at home. During the second week, her calls became less frequent. When we did talk, she sounded different. Still positive about the experience, but more distant somehow. I figured she was just getting deeper into the program, focusing more on the work they were doing there. The whole point was to step away from normal life and focus on healing and getting ready for pregnancy. A little distance from home was probably a good thing. When the 2 weeks were supposed to end, Vera called to say they were extending the program. The instructors had offered an extra week of one-on-one coaching for people who were showing really good progress. It was an opportunity that didn't come up often, and both she and Rachel had been picked. The extra week would cost another $500, but Vera felt like she was close to some kind of breakthrough. I wasn't thrilled about the extra expense or the extra time apart, but I could hear the excitement in her voice. If the retreat was helping her feel hopeful again, it was worth the money and the inconvenience. I told her to take the extra week, focus on getting everything she could from the experience. She came home on a Tuesday afternoon, almost 3 weeks after she'd left. I picked her up at the airport, and she looked more relaxed. She talked constantly during the drive home about everything she'd learned, all the techniques and approaches we could try, the diet changes that might help, the stress reduction methods that had made such a difference for her. That first week back, everything felt different between us. Vera was more affectionate, more optimistic, more like her old self than she'd been since we'd started trying to have kids. We put into practice some of the techniques she'd learned. Meditation before bed, diet changes, and specific supplements the retreat had recommended. For the first time in months, we weren't constantly focused on fertility and pregnancy. We were just enjoying being married again. I thought the retreat had been exactly what we both needed, even though I hadn't gone with her. 6 weeks after she returned, Vera came home from work with a pregnancy test in her hand. She was crying, but they were happy tears. After 4 years of trying, after all the medical procedures and disappointments and stress, she was finally pregnant. We held each other in our kitchen and cried together, just full of joy and gratitude. I called in sick to work the next day so we could go to a hospital together to confirm the pregnancy. The blood test results were clear. Vera was about 5 weeks pregnant, which meant she'd gotten pregnant right around the time she returned from a retreat. It felt like a miracle. Like all the alternative treatments and stress reduction had finally allowed her body to do what it was supposed to do naturally. The first few months of the pregnancy went smoothly. Vera had minimal morning sickness, her energy levels were good, and every appointment showed that the baby was developing normally. We started making plans. After years of disappointment, we were finally going to be parents. I was working extra shifts whenever possible to save money for the baby. I was regularly working 50 to 60 hours a week, banking the extra pay for all the expenses that would come with having a child. When Vera was about 4 months pregnant, she started having problems with her phone. The screen would freeze up randomly, apps would crash, and text messages wouldn't come through consistently. It was an older model that had been giving us minor problems for months, but now it was becoming unusable. She asked me to take a look at it on a Saturday morning when I wasn't working. I've always been good with electronics and computers, and I've fixed similar problems with phones before. Usually, it's just a matter of clearing the cache, updating the software, or doing a factory reset if necessary. I was going through the settings menu trying to figure out what might be causing the problems when a text message notification popped up. We'd never had any privacy issues in our marriage. I tapped on the message notification to clear it from the screen so I could continue working on the settings. The message was from a contact labeled simply D, with a phone number I didn't recognize. The preview showed just the beginning of the text. Please don't do this to me. I stared at the screen for a minute, trying to process what I was seeing. The message didn't make sense in any context I could think of related to Vera's work or family, or any situation she might be involved in. I opened the message thread to see what the conversation was about. What I found made my stomach drop. Months of text messages between Vera and this person, with the most recent ones being the most disturbing. The person, clearly a man based on the conversation, was begging Vera not to tell his wife that she was pregnant with his child. He was offering her money, increasing amounts over time, to keep quiet about their affair and the pregnancy. Vera's responses were cold and calculating. She wasn't asking for specific amounts, but she was making it clear that her silence had a price. She'd mentioned things like needing money for baby clothes, or how expensive it would be to raise a child as a single mother if her marriage didn't work out. The man kept sending larger and larger payments, and Vera kept the demands persistent. I scrolled through older messages, trying to understand when this had started and how long it had been going on. The conversation went back to right after Vera had returned from a retreat. The early messages were more romantic, talking about how much they'd enjoyed their time together, how difficult it was to be apart, and how they wished they could be open about their relationship. As the messages got more recent, the tone changed completely. When Vera found out she was pregnant, the man was initially excited, then panicked when he realized what it meant. Vera had apparently told him that she was going to pass the baby off as mine, but that she expected money support from him throughout the pregnancy and beyond. The man's contact information was just a phone number, but something about the area code seemed familiar. I did a reverse lookup online and found that it was registered to Rachel's husband, Vera's best friend's husband, the man who had gone with them to the wellness retreat. What hit me most was realizing this while I sat there reading months of messages that showed an affair, a pregnancy, and ongoing blackmail. For years of trying to have kids with someone who would get pregnant by another man and try to pass that child off as mine. The pregnancy we'd celebrated and the future I'd been planning weren't real. When Vera came to the living room that afternoon, I was still sitting on the couch with her phone in my hands. She knew immediately that something was wrong. She asked what had happened, whether I'd been able to fix the phone problem, and her voice had a nervous edge that I'd never heard before. I held up the phone and asked her who David was. The color drained from her face, but she tried to keep her composure. She said David was Rachel's husband. Of course, I knew that, but why was I asking such a strange question? I told her I'd seen the text messages, all of them, and I knew what had really happened during the retreat. She tried to gaslight me. She claimed the messages were being taken out of context, that David was just a friend who was helping us financially during the pregnancy, and that there was nothing wrong about their relationship. When I read specific messages out loud, she said I was reading everything wrong. I asked her directly, "Is this baby mine?" She looked me straight in the eye and said, "Yes, of course it was mine. How could I even question that after everything we'd been through trying to have kids?" She accused me of being paranoid and suspicious, of looking for reasons to destroy our marriage just when things were finally going well. I asked her if she'd slept with David during the retreat. She didn't answer directly, just kept insisting that the baby was mine and that I was crazy to think otherwise. When I pressed her for a straight answer about the affair, she walked out of the room. That night, she slept in the guest bedroom. The next morning, she tried to act like nothing had happened, making breakfast and talking about a doctor's appointment later that week. When I brought up the fight again, she said we needed to move past this misunderstanding and focus on preparing for our baby. I told her I wanted a paternity test. She refused, saying it would be harmful to the baby and completely unnecessary since there was no question about who the father was. She accused me of being influenced, suggesting that I was having some kind of breakdown brought on by years of fertility problems and money pressure. When I told her I was thinking about ending the marriage, her entire attitude changed. The confident denials turned to desperate begging. She grabbed my arm and begged me not to leave her, especially now that she was pregnant. She promised to cut off all contact with David, to change her phone number, to do whatever I needed to rebuild trust between us. But when I asked her again whether she'd had an affair, she still wouldn't give me a straight answer. She'd admit that maybe she'd gotten too close to David during the retreat, that maybe some of their conversations had been wrong, but she insisted that nothing physical had happened, and that the baby was definitely mine. I couldn't live with the uncertainty and the lies. 2 weeks later, I filed for divorce. I found a lawyer who handled family law and explained the situation. He said paternity fraud cases were more common than people realized, and that I had strong grounds for divorce based on adultery if I could prove the affair. When Vera was served with the divorce papers, she hired her own lawyer and completely changed her strategy. In her response to my filing, she claimed that I was abandoning her and our unborn child, that I was using false claims about infidelity to avoid my responsibilities as a father and husband. Her lawyer painted me as a man who'd been unable to handle the stress of fertility treatments and was now looking for an excuse to escape from my obligations. The legal stuff dragged on for months. Vera fought every aspect of the divorce, especially my request for a paternity test. Her lawyer argued that requesting genetic testing showed that I was unfit to be a father, that I was putting my own paranoid suspicions ahead of the well-being of an innocent child. The judge initially seemed sympathetic to Vera's position. A pregnant woman whose husband was seeking divorce based on unproven claims of infidelity was a sympathetic figure in family court. My lawyer presented the text messages as evidence of an affair and blackmail, but Vera's lawyer argued that they'd been taken out of context and didn't prove anything definitive about the pregnancy. In the end, the court ordered a separation of assets, but delayed the final divorce decree until after the baby was born and paternity could be established for sure. Vera was awarded temporary possession of our house and spousal support during the pregnancy. I moved into a small apartment across town and waited. The baby was born many months after, a healthy girl. She was beautiful, and for a brief moment I allowed myself to hope that maybe I'd been wrong about everything, that this was actually my daughter and we could find a way to rebuild our family. The paternity test results came back 2 weeks later. David was the baby's father with 99.97% certainty. I wasn't the father of the child whose pregnancy had felt like a miracle after years of trying. With DNA proof of paternity fraud, my divorce lawyer was able to reopen the case and go after more claims. We sued Vera for causing me emotional distress and fraud. The court ordered her to pay back any money I'd spent on pregnancy stuff, canceled the support payments, and gave me the house back. Vera's lawyer tried to argue that the affair had been a mistake, that she'd really believed the baby might be mine, that she'd acted out of panic rather than on purpose. The judge wasn't completely sympathetic to Vera's explanations. Paternity fraud is taken seriously in family court, especially when it's combined with evidence of ongoing lies and money demands. Vera was ordered to leave our house within 30 days and to stop any contact with David on attempts to get money from him for the child. I never found out exactly what happened between Vera and Rachel after the truth came out. But I felt like Rachel deserved to know what her husband had done, especially since she'd probably been wondering why their own fertility treatments hadn't worked, while Vera had gotten pregnant immediately after the retreat. I called Rachel about a month after the baby was born. She was polite but cold, and it was clear she already knew most of what I was going to tell her. She said she and David were getting divorced, that she'd found out about the affair on her own when David had confessed everything after the paternity test results became public. She thanked me for calling, but made it clear she didn't want to stay friends given the circumstances. What I discovered is that 4 years of marriage doesn't guarantee you actually know your spouse. Vera wasn't just unfaithful. She was calculating and manipulative in ways I'd never imagined. She'd planned the affair, set up the lies, and was prepared to let me raise another man's child while blackmailing the real father for money. The woman I'd married and tried to start a family with was capable of a level of betrayal that still surprises me when I think about it. Looking back now, I realize that sometimes what feels like the worst betrayal actually saves you from something far worse. Those fertility issues that caused us so much pain for 4 years, they prevented me from having kids with someone whose character I'd misjudged. If we'd gotten pregnant naturally early in our marriage, I might have spent decades with Vera, never knowing she was capable of this level of calculated deception. The retreat that seemed like such a hopeful solution turned out to expose exactly who she was. Sometimes life protects you in ways you don't recognize until much later. I don't know what happened to Vera after she moved out. I heard through mutual friends that she'd moved back in with her parents and was raising the baby as a single mother. David apparently wasn't providing any money support for the child, and Rachel had gotten most of their assets in their divorce settlement. Vera's plan to get financial security through lies had backfired completely. As for me, I'm still single, still working, still living one day at a time. The house is quiet, but it's honest. I don't have to wonder what secrets are hidden in text messages or worry about whether the person sleeping next to me is the person I think they are. Loneliness is difficult, but it's better than living with someone you can't trust. Sometimes the truth costs everything you thought you wanted, but it's still worth more than a life built on lies. Thanks for watching.